coming here, I saw Shubhanka. I saw Shubhanka, and we had a little walk around. And he was asking me some pretty challenging questions. And a pattern that seems to arise with me is this feeling that there is a seed of greatness, and then the thought that I'm not the hero that saves the world. And he was challenging me to explore nurturing this seed, for lack of better words. And then I challenge back as if I'm arguing with myself, with him, and say it's just the ego wants to be big and grand and be something special. And I'm finding myself, for lack of better words, giving up on that. And part of that restlessness there is the space in which I booked the ticket to come here. Okay. When that's gone, like before my flight to come to India, I actually couldn't care less whether I came or not. But it seems that this lingering feeling of rising up, being something more than what I am, I'm sure it's something that people commonly face, whether they should be moving towards some potential or becoming something other than what they are, versus you move my legs. So I thought that little conversation there we had, I thought I might begin with by bringing forth to you this tension between being something more versus just the same way I got here. It's great, I have no explanation. Can I just leave it and continue onwards with my life and let whatever happens, happens? Do you hear?
It's just that the distinction, the feeling of being special that one wants to pursue is not merely by becoming the savior of the world, not merely by chasing greatness or success or some kind of a conspicuous height. When one is feeling small and general and average, isn't that too some kind of distinction?
Yes, that doesn't arise. It's sorry to interrupt. Is it okay? Yeah. In my situation, I'm not sitting around thinking, I'm small, I need to be big, I'm actually okay. Then it's the thoughts that I should be doing something more come, and if I start to listen and buy into that, then I'm booking a ticket to India. So it definitely must be in response to a sense of inadequacy, otherwise that thought wouldn't arise. But I'm not consciously thinking, just want to put that there. I'm refraining from defining myself at all. How can I?
It's just that the pursuit of greatness is most commonly a well thought out and conscious pursuit. So when that happens, one knows fully well that he is chasing distinction. And because one knows of that, so one can point fingers at that. I am consciously chasing distinction. I want to be separate, I want to be high, I want to be better in a relative sense. I want to be somebody. And because all of that is often a thought out and planned maneuver, so it can be criticized. And rightly so. It deserves appraisal, criticism. But the tendency to remain little is an unconscious tendency. One remains little by default. One doesn't plan to remain little. One is born little. One is raised little. That's the preset way of our operation, and because it is happening without our consent, without our planning, without our thoughts, so it cannot be criticized, simply because it cannot be seen. So it becomes a strange situation. Because one's littlenesses remain all deeply embedded beyond the visual range, so one is unconscious of them. And being unconscious, one cannot analyze them, criticize them. One almost feels okay with them, because as we said, they are our default mode of operation. And whatever is the default appears normal, and if it appears normal, and if one lives in a relative way, then normal is right. That's how we judge rightness, right? If it is normal, it is right. So then that never attracts any kind of criticism. I am normal. And what is this normality? The usual littleness that everybody is born with. But the moment one tries to pursue greatness, because it is a conscious effort, it is bound to be a conscious effort, it starts attracting all kinds of censor. One censors it. One censors it. Now that can be tricky. One is then in defense of, in favor of the hidden smallnesses, and one starts castigating one's own attempts to rise beyond the littlenesses. Not auspicious. At the same time, often the attempt to rise beyond littleness is just a blind reaction to the adversities one faces because of his smallnesses. And it being a blind reaction, it does not give any real greatness. It only gives another type of smallness masquerading as greatness. So that ought to be fairly criticized. That is not what any kind of spirituality or self-development is about. One has to be cautious. one just, feels like shrugging his shoulders and saying, why can't I be just all right as I am? In fact, there are many reasonably popular schools of thought that say that everything is all right just as it is. You just stop resisting. They say there's nothing wrong with the universe. The universe is perfectly okay. It's your resistance, your inability to adjust, your demand to carve out a niche for yourself, your urge to feel special in the scheme of things. That's the culprit. This is what they say. That school of thought is quite dangerous, because it is based on the assumption that everything is all right. Now, for whom? When you say everything is all right, there has to be a subject with respect to whom all appears all right. When you tell someone everything is all right, is he all right? Had he been all right, why would he have been there in the first place to listen to you? The starting point cannot be everything is all right. This is an absolutist frame of reference, and it is false. If you want to help, if you want to treat or counsel, you have to offer advice with respect to the fellow who is in front of you, and ask that fellow to honestly reply, is everything all right with him? Obviously not everything is all right with him. Had everything been all right, then he could have said, there is no need for me to change. There is no need for me to change, nor is there any need for me to try to change anything in the world. Everything is already all right. But is that really the case? Not everything is all right. In fact, there is very little that is all right within oneself and therefore outside of us. Look at the state of affairs within people and on the planet. Obviously, this state of affairs is not a result of all rightness. We are not all right. And one cannot just pretend that he is all right. When all evidence loudly suggests that there is a lot of sickness, how can one just start pretending everything is already okay? And even if there is such pretension, will it lead to an actual change in his experience? He would still be suffering. So it would then be a very hypocritical situation in which there is suffering inside and smiles on the lips, and the words are saying, I am all right. So, I don't see much merit in that. In some sense, this that we call as the quest for liberation, not truth, or actualization of one's potential, this has to be an ambitious project. And I'm using the word ambitious quite consciously. It needs to have the drive of ambition. It needs to have a raw power behind it. there has to be a solid and shameless desire to break away. A desire so shameless that it won't hide its face when somebody accuses it of being gaudy or loud or hungry or mean. That meanness is needed. Yes, I want it and I want it. I'm not satisfied and I'm not satisfied. It has to be a desirous meanness that is not evidenced even in the most lustful person, deprived of sex and hunting for it. It has to be a raw ambition that is not evidenced even in the most greedy profiteer looking to make more money. It has to be a meanness that is not evidenced even in the wild beast. Trying to somehow kill another animal for the sake of its little fulfillment. That kind of unapologetic attitude has to be there.
The ambition, when I hear this type of word, implies to me at least some sort of direction. And the starting point is of inadequacy, conceiving of greatness, and then are you not blindly moving in a direction that you have just made up based on your idea of what greatness might look like?
Semi-blindly. Because you may not know exactly which direction to move in. But at least you have ticked off one particular direction. Which one?
Right, the direction I'm going now.
Right. So it is not a case of rushing about completely blindly to some direction. So it's like being at the crossroads and not really having 4 options. At least one of the options has been struck out. The option that one is currently following, because that is the option that has brought one to the crossroads. So the probability of success is not 1/4, it is actually 1/3. And so, yes, one does grope about a bit in a haze, does not know what is really going on. And therefore the seeker this desirous, ambitious seeker has to be very flexible, very committed. And that's what is classically called as surrender. He will make mistakes, a lot of mistakes. But every mistake has to be better than the previous one. That is the only way of reaching the truth. In the Upanishads, it has been classically called as the path of neti neti. You will not know what the correct choice is. You have to proceed by way of elimination. Just keep eliminating whatever does not work out for you. There is no other way. Truth otherwise is directly unapproachable. You cannot conceive it, name it, give it a figure, situate it at some place, and then rush towards it. That cannot be done. So what is it that can be done? One can just keep ticking off one's own imaginations, the paths that one's own fallible intellect creates, and there is no way to strike them out but by walking on them, which means there would be apparently a lot of wastage of time involved as well. And if you're not fully committed, then that wastage of time can start appearing intolerable. You might say, I tried this, and it's been 10 years now. Where have I reached? And it seems such a genuine question to ask. What did I get by investing these 10 years? There is no other way.
With my journey, so to speak, I can't even remember what I'm aiming towards anymore. I hear these questions and your answers. I enjoy listening like I would music every evening, sit down, listen. And that is sufficient.
See, the thing that requires redressal is not apparent. It sits deep within our physical structure. It sits in the DNA. It's there in the body. So all you can know of is a certain becoming of experience. Becoming. The whole experience gains a certain calmness. So it's only indirectly that you can know that something is working out for you. Please try to get the whole mechanics. Consciously you try to work out a path for yourself, but you are consciously working out a path for yourself in order to become the unconscious. How will you know whether the unconscious is feeling any better now? Only by your experience. Only by your experience. There is no way to directly know whether you are benefiting. Sometimes the benefit might show itself up a few months later, a few weeks later, sometimes immediately, sometimes years later. Therefore, this entire pursuit belongs only to the one who is quite hard-nosed and thick-skinned. First of all, what you are consciously choosing is being chosen without complete information, and complete information can never be had. Then whether or not you have rightly chosen becomes known to you at a much later point. And it can be quite frustrating. Can be very frustrating. That frustration can be somehow tolerated if one has love. If that is there, then one can pass through all this. Rather start kind of relishing it after a point. Look at the kind of trap that has been set for us. No. Look at the kind of trap that we are for ourselves. This is the trap. Even if you are on your way out of the trap, you will not know that it is the right way, that it leads to freedom, till after a long time. Similarly, if you are going down a wrong lane within the trap, you will not realize that it is the wrong lane till after a certain while. You will be very lucky to immediately sense it, which can happen, but the probability is thin. One has to get knocked off, and one must keep bouncing against the walls again and again. It's just that exits are available. It's not a perfectly bleak situation. If one is determined, etc., all the usual old stuff about the right qualities that a seeker must have, then stuff does happen. As you make your way through all these things, one thing you must remember, I would advise, all this that you are doing must surely remain open to criticism by you and criticism by others. Obviously, you must not become dogmatic about it. Obviously, you must not start claiming that all that you have been doing in order to understand what life is, what man is, what this world is, has been just very rightly done. Never say that. If someone comes and tells you, you wasted your last 6 months, you wasted your last $5,000, say, yes, it is quite possible. Because after all, what one is doing is a product of one's reasoning, one's intellect, one's subconscious forces. So, there is no surprise in it if it goes wrong. So be humble in that. But let all that self-criticism or worldly censor never mean to you that you have to tamely settle down with what you have as a result of your human birth, as a result of your social conditioning and all this stuff. It is bad to be going down the wrong lanes in search of salvation, but it is far worse to be settling down with one's own conditioned self, assuming it to be already all right. Of this I can assure you, nobody is already all right. Man has somehow not been blessed with that gift. We are all, in a sense, born cursed. Every kid that is born, in a sense, psychologically sick. And that's why this lifelong pursuit of freedom and reality is needed. So, completely close to yourself the option to just remain as you biologically and socially are. Begin with that commitment. And that commitment must never mean that your endeavors to go a little beyond what your physical birth gave you will all be spectacularly successful. One, you have to know that we are born trapped. Secondly, you have to also know that we are born with a trapped intellect as well, a trapped consciousness as well. It is not merely the unconscious or subconscious universe within us that is bleak and gloomy. That which we call as our bright and illumined consciousness is also arising from the background of the unconscious. So it is also quite grey, if not entirely dark. And hence, the decisions it will make to get rid of the primordial darkness in its background will themselves carry a lot of tint of the darkness that it wants to get rid of. Hence, your efforts are bound to be mostly not proper. You must still stay put. Must still stay put. It's like a fat man running to reduce his fat. He has to run or jog with the same fat body that he aims to reduce. Therefore, he will not be able to run or jog very briskly or efficiently. But still, what must he do? Halt, sit, lie down. So, given our limited consciousness, we have to use this same consciousness with all its limitations to find a way that takes us away from the limitations. An onerous task. Nevertheless, it must be undertaken.
As I listen to you, I try to connect in my own experience. So I can only be honest with that. It's as if now, maybe it's arrogance blinding me, but it's like I'm trying to look for the problem because I'm convinced that there must be one. And when I can convince myself that there is a problem, only then can I start to move out of it. But when I'm looking at my situation and my daily life, it's as if I've been so used to there being something to a problem that it's I am struggling to believe that it's possible that there could be no actual problem. So then I listen and try to find or look in a mirror to try and see what do I need to work on, what is going on here. But if I just stop all that, then
there is no experience of a problem.
Yeah, there's no experience problem. I'm sitting down. What's the problem right now? What's the problem right now, really? Unless I look for one, then I can try it. I can reference myself against some sage or saint that's living some marvelous self-sacrificial life and try to say, then I'm not like that. And that can then create a problem. I'm not Jesus, I'm not Acharya-ji, I'm not. Then that's the only kind of problem I can see, is that I am trying to just, I may not chat with you for a while, so it's like I'm trying to accept that things are okay until I do genuinely see something that's not okay.
Not okay, right. And that brings us to another of those self-serving fallacies. Because we are liable to be conditioned, so that's another conditioning that sits upon us. There has to be a problem. And then one starts to deliberately and forcibly find a problem. And many people succeed in finding a problem. And usually they find a problem where there is none. Do you see what is amiss in this approach? The problem lies very, very deep within. And we start looking for it in the superficial strata of our activities, of our being. It cannot be discovered there, right? And if one somehow forces himself to discover it there, then one has identified some kind of a false problem, or rather not even identified it, imagined it. How will you know something is a problem? You know something is a problem when it causes discomfort to you, when it makes you uneasy or nervous or fearful, tense. Then you say, oh, there is a problem, right? So we identify problems by way of experience. The little glitch is, all experience depends on the experiencer. If the experiencer himself is a product of all kinds of superficialities, then the superficialities will cease to feel like a problem to him. So you say, I want to identify the problem. This I that wants to locate the problem might itself be the problem, because the I is not what it, for want of better words, deserves to be. So the I is saying, I am all right. I stand firm. Now standing where I am, let me look for the problem. The thing is, standing where the I is, if it looks around for a problem, all it sees is its own world. And the world has this I at its center. So how will there ever be a conflict, a recognition of a problem? The world is I's world, and the I is a product of the world. So the two are happily synchronized with each other. The world will not complain against the I. The I will not complain against the world. So now the I says everything is already alright, I'm okay. What is the need for any kind of redemption or salvation or whatever? It's a bad loop, a closed one. Are you getting it? The one who is to first of all perceive a problem is himself the problem. The experiencer is the I. And the experiencer is a product of experiences. So the I is false. Now this false I, how will it ever complain against falsenesses? What to do then? Now there remains nothing in the world that will compel the I to know and acknowledge its falseness. Nothing. Because the world is the world of I. In other words, the world and the I are just the same. They won't complain against themselves. What to do then? Then there is only one way really, Jamie. The way of companionship and comparison.
Companionship and comparison.
How else will you bring it to the I that I need not be what I am? The world is not going to suggest that to the I. You need to find very special company. If you can't find it in a living man, then you have to find it in books. In the company of the exalted I, some faint reverberation happens within. One starts saying, all this appears all right, all this gives me comfort and ease, but still, just the presence of this man next to me, staring at me from the pages of this book, is making me uneasy. That is auspicious. If you can be with the best and the highest that have been, and if they make you feel a little queasy, it's good. Which again does not mean that one has to deliberately force himself to feel little or small or humble in front of the greats. It's just that one has to make himself available to the greats. Even probably without declaring that the greats are greats. Maybe just out of curiosity, that is sufficient. One might just say, well, why is everybody talking of this fellow? Why are 2 billion people following this fellow? What did he do that people swear by his name 2 millennia after his death? I mean, I'm curious. I'm not yet accepting him as a great. But I think that kind of impact enough is enough to warrant some curiosity, is it not? So then you sit with a Jesus. Then you say, fellow, I'm not yet giving in. I'm not yet calling you a great. I'm just curious. So tell me, what do you have to say? And then after a while you say, wait, this fellow's world does not appear quite like mine. Is there something alternate possible? What is he talking of? These words belong to a language that I know and yet seem to be coming from somewhere else. This kind of thing may happen, may not happen. I'm not suggesting that you must make it happen, but it is possible that it may happen. So just let yourself be available. Be available to everything without prejudice. Obviously, in choosing what to be available to, you will use your consciousness, you will use your intellect. So many a times you will go wrong. You might spend time with someone and after a while you might discover that the time has gone waste. You have to be prepared for this wastage. 1 out of 10 times you will succeed. And that is sufficient, even if it is 1 out of 100.
The tendency to imitate is something that has gripped me before in class. It's not, I'm assuming it's not in terms of, or perhaps it is, the activity of your life meeting a certain criteria in which you can then say, I'm satisfied with it. It surely has to be the intimacy of heart, the intimacy of the place from which these people are
let's keep the whole thing very scientific, again for want of a better word. Let's assume that most of the so-called greats were bogus fraudsters. Let's assume that they were just blabbering their way to some kind of popularity, propagandists they were. Let's assume. Why not be skeptical in the beginning? So don't go to them as if you are already submitted to them. Then the tendency to imitate will not be there. Go to them like a skeptic. And if you cannot even be a skeptic, go to them with the worst attitude possible. Be a cynic. But do go to them in some capacity or the other, with some attitude or other. Go to them even if to abuse them. It's okay. The worst thing that you can do to them and to yourself is indifference. Saying, I don't bother. I don't bother who you are. And I'm not merely talking of religious figures. I'm also talking of a Tolstoy. Right? Why not go to him? I'm also talking of scientists and politicians and warriors. and artists and mathematicians and painters. Go to them with a healthy skepticism. See what they have to say. That's what I mean by companionship and comparison. It's a healthy comparison that I'm talking of. Not the psychological kind of comparison in which you operate via a superiority or inferiority complex. A very objective comparison. Very objective comparison. Well, this fellow wrote this book at the age of 25. 25, all right. I'm 28. How many hours were there in his day? That kind of thing I'm talking of. Very objective comparison.
This kind of thing plays on my mind in coming close to a figure like Jesus, who began his mission at 30, which is when I turned 30, I'm 30 now. You know, I can only imagine him looking at the situation before his eyes, people oppressed, religious leaders twisted, and his life, what we saw in those 3 years, was a response to that, an honest response to that, putting aside his preferences. He could have very well easily when one looks at the situation of what is in front of us, including our role in that, to me, and I'm sure for other people, it's like an uncertainty of how to express that response. So the default for me, for example, is to just leave it until it comes out. Eventually will be a point where it ticks and the right response comes. But I see a danger in this because each day's going by, the world's on fire, and what am I waiting for is the question. But then there's the next part that comes is, well, what is it? And as I'm speaking this out, it's linking up to something that you said earlier. It's kind of answered my question anyway. Surely we are looking at the world, we're looking at the futility of how we're living our daily lives. There's something bigger than us that is demanding or requiring us. Yet I'm sure there is this uncertainty of how to go about a beginning, in a sense. You mentioned in Chandigarh to me to experiment with methods and this kind of thing. Now I hear it to come close to like Leo Tolstoy and these people. These were artists, scientists. They found in their lives their means of creatively expressing that which they felt was most dear and worth expressing. So one sits there and thinks, well, it's like a blocked pipe wanting to... am I making any sense?
Yes, you are. Yes.
Yeah. It's like the fire is there, but you're not doing anything.
Jimmy, what happens is you know of a Jesus posthumously. You hear of the words and works of the greats in retrospect. How was it for them really when they were beginning? Were they very sure of what to do and where to go? Was it all laid out very clearly to them, like a nice blueprint or a roadmap? So everybody starts in a kind of twilight, not really seeing the shape of things very clearly, not really knowing which road to take, where to turn, where to stop, and where to reach. Nobody knows that. But if you look at their entire life journey, after they have done it, then it appears to you as if they were really special people with an almost otherworldly sense of discretion, an unbelievable insight, prodigal clarity, and we start attributing all these distinctions to them. They too were somehow trying to figure out a way. They too were somehow dragging themselves ahead. Later on, you can have anecdotes and parables and apocryphal accounts that tell you that they sprinted through life as one jogs on a jogging track. It has been neatly laid out and everything has been cleared out to you. The thing has been
Yeah. No, I have had this image, what your
So they too did have blocked pipes. And very honestly, they did the little they could. What probably you are not considering here is the power of progress. Once you take the next step, you are the next person. So your capacity to act and the clarity of your sight just increases tremendously. If you sit where you are, then the entire journey would appear extremely arduous, rather impossible. But if you keep taking one step after the other, then it's almost like compounded interest. It grows in an exponential way. And you cannot just sit here and linearly imagine it. You just begin. And then you say, wow, having begun, it becomes easier to continue, and I feel encouraged and emboldened to take more decisive steps. It's almost like a kid growing from class 1 to class 10 in his school. It's just 10 years we are talking of, right? But look at the progress. Can you compare a high schooler, class 10, with a class 1 kid? Within a space of 10 years, there is it's almost a transmutation. Believe me, all have to go through it. It should not be very difficult for you to visualize a Jesus, a teenaged Jesus, sitting under some tree and wondering whether life is worth living, and wondering whether he needs to indulge in some kind of activism. And whether he should spend that evening just wandering by himself on the hillocks, or by responding to a date proposal he might have received from one of the charming girls. We hear that Jesus was quite handsome. So, the teenage Jesus would have attracted a lot of female attention, I suppose. He too would have struggled with these things, just as anybody else does. A little bit more honesty, a little bit more application, a little bit more determination, just a little bit more. That's what sets apart the greats. And it will not be visible as you sit here. As you sit here, all you can probably see is the immediate context, in which there is no clear scope of further movement. But things change drastically if you decide to stay put and continue moving despite all the reversals. There was one thing that I used to be quite curious of. Not the end product that the great man is. Great man from any sphere of life. Greatness is one. I was quite curious about the process. Over time, I gave up that curiosity. But when I was a kid, 8 or 10 or early teenage, I would ask, how was he at my age? What was he doing? It was quite important for me to know. Because if he is born great, then I may as well not try. I'm not here to compete in a fixed match. If the fellow is a prodigy, who am I to try to even look at him? He's destined, I'm not. But that has never been the case. The followers and the fan crowds have later on attributed, false stories and such things. But wherever genuine accounts are available, and if you go through them, you will find that the fellow has struggled just as anybody else does. In fact, he has had the appetite to struggle even more. And then you will truly admire them. When you will see that he is not quite the son of God that he is made out to be. He is the Son of Man. Son of Man determined to discover godliness. Then your respect for him increases manifold. Not only respect, then you really relate, and that's love. And that's love. Hmm? So there is no need to rush into action. There is no need to think that the world is burning and what am I doing here? Just yapping. The response will come. In fact, the world burns one person at a time. The world burns by taking it into its lap, one person at a time. One more person succumbing to his latent tendencies is one more log in the fire. So if you can just protect yourself, if you can just insulate yourself from the fire, in a sense, you are contributing towards putting out the fire. You need not come up with heroic activism. You need not come up with spectacular display of the kind that Superman movies are made of. To begin with, just to not to succumb to the fire is resistance enough. And later on, as you progress and proceed, you may find that your inner calmness is spreading to others. It's a response, a spontaneous, unplanned thing, and it does happen. I don't think Jesus had all planned it out.
Yeah. This is the kind of image that I have, and I have found relating with Jesus as a man is what then led to me believing that there's a possibility that some miraculous thing could happen, because just a common man is sacrificing himself for love. And yeah, I hear.
If it was a planned activity, it could be called as poor planning, A young man getting crucified in his early 30s cannot be the result of brilliant planning.
Yeah, sure, definitely.
It happens. And its effectiveness goes far beyond what planning could have achieved. The most well thought out plan, well thought out and brilliantly executed plan would be faint in comparison to what a Jesus achieves through his sheer spontaneity. Preserve yourself, discover yourself, and then strange things will happen. You're not obliged to do things the way others are doing it. And when I say others, I mean both the so-called commoners and the so-called greats. Getting inspired is one thing, and falling for imitation is totally another. Do get inspired. Spend time with them. Spend a lot of time with them. I mean, isn't that far better than spending time with the lout down the road? And there are so many of them, and especially in the age of social media, they are all over you. Do you really want to spend time with them? Why not spend time with those who really deserve to be seen, to be heard? The redeeming part is mankind has not known more than a few thousands of them. So their life stories, their accounts, their works are anyway not very profusely available. 1,000, 5,000, no more than that. That's already a lot, yeah. So be with them, spend time with them. And if the chap starts being too much, begins to psychologically dominate you, just slap him on the wrist a little and say, "You're a nice fellow, but don't just walk all over me." I'm with you, I'm not under you. Some of them had the habit of speaking too loudly through their works or words or books. They deserve all the respect. But they themselves would have never liked to dominate anyone. Dominating someone is probably worse than accepting domination. They would have never liked that, never. So, admire them, but don't be a blind follower. And then they will reveal their best to you. It's all right. Once you have it, you are living in a society, you will meet with people, they'll see it. Those who deserve to, that is. Even if they don't come to you, speak to you, or congratulate you, the way you look, the way you walk, the intonation, the very cadence, the gaze, it all has an impact on everything. We said the I is the world is the I. If you are changing, you will not know in what all ways you are impacting the world. And you don't really intend to start a new religion, do you? So it's okay if you don't get the acknowledgement. It's okay if nobody comes and says, Jamie, the new one, the latest one. It's okay. If a furious fellow, tense and irritated, can spread irritation all around, why can't a peaceful fellow, just by his presence, be a messenger of peace? Without preaching. Which does not mean that you must necessarily refrain from preaching. It's just that it is not practical to always preach. And when you cannot preach, then your very personality is the message.
That in and of itself, is that not the work? That is the work. That's the work. Okay. Yeah.
Spirituality has been turned into some kind of a superhero comic strip. As if everybody who is spiritual must martyr himself to some kind of holy mission. That may happen, but that is not a sine qua non. You cannot say that if you were not martyred, then you don't have it. Or if you didn't perform miracles, then you don't have it. Or if you didn't fly through the sky, or didn't raise the dying, or didn't command a huge followership, or didn't beget a religion, then you haven't done it. That's not the purpose of self-discovery or spiritual upliftment. Those things happen once in a while, as a byproduct, when the time is ripe. The real thing is to see how one is operating, where all that comes from, what is this thing called consciousness, from where does the I sense arise, what really is going on. Once you figure that out or start figuring it out, bit by bit, it's good fun. So how is it turning out? Worse than a planned interview? That's all. We'll speak again. How, when, that let time decide.
Thank you.